model laptop is a problem.
Sir, you don't have to.
Oh, that's great.
Start the recording.
Start it, no problem. Record.
Yeah, I'm giving host access to you and Aarti ma'am, and I'm leaving.
Yeah,
Fine.
sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Enters into the room, you just allow them, ma'am.
Yeah, sir. Yeah.
And just tell them if somebody more people join, let them wait till 5 o'clock.
Huh.
Okay, ma'am. Sir, good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir. Good evening.
No problem, sir. Kiran sir, welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Kincha sir,
Yes, sir.
sir, we can just start ahead, sir.
Yes, yes, we can start. I'm ready.
Right, sir.
Everybody has joined?
Yeah, they're still joining, sir, but we cannot wait for them, sir. Anyhow, we'll be running out of time.
Oh.
So with that, we'll just start in between. They'll join, sir.
Okay, no problem, sir. For me.
Right. Good evening, one and all present here in the meeting today. So it's pleasure to welcome you all to the IIC, that is Institutions Innovation Council's session on how to start startups, the ethical and legal ways. So we have with us Mr. Kiran sir, who has been doing this for a quite long period of time, and he's going to talk to us about how the startups have to be started ethically and legally. And before that, we have one of the most eminent personality with us, Professor Kincha sir. So he was a surprise note to us that he has joined our meeting. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. To brief about Kincha sir. It will take quite long time because I have 4 pages of note,
No,
which is
don't read everything. No,
I'll
please.
not read there. I'll just complete it in 2 minutes, sir. I summarize in 2 minutes rather. So Professor H.P. Kincha is currently working as a chairman, Karnataka State Innovation Council, and he's a distinguished member and advisor to many state and central government organizations. He was associated with various universities in the past as a faculty at international level. One of them was National University of Singapore. He has spent most of time in his own alma mater, where there is the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. From 1969 to 2011, he was associated with the ASC. He was vice chancellor of our own VTU or Vishweshwara Technological University, Belagavi, between 2007 and 10. He was a member of various organizations like AICTE, UGC, Steel Authority of India Limited, Electronics Corporation of India Limited, CPRA, to name few. He is very closely associated with professional bodies like IEEE and ISTE. And sir has been awarded with numerous awards from various organizations for his contribution to the society. Few of them are IEEE. Government of India have honored sir with a lot of awards. And if you look at his schooling and college, he has done his bachelor's in electronics engineering from Bangalore University, and master's and PhD from Indian Institute of Science. And sir has been awarded as second rank student in bachelor's degree and first rank in master's degree. So it's a privilege to listen to you, sir. Thank you for accepting your honor and being here, sir.
Thank you so much. Good evening to all who have joined this virtual seminar. And I'm told that this will go on for a few days in the next few weeks. And
yes, sir.
Today, I think this is as per the Innovation Council of the college, as one
yes,
of the
sir.
activities of the Innovation Council of the college. And the expert, Dr. Kiran Betadarpur, who is with us today, and I think he will be taking the lead session on the startups and the ways of creating startups and things like that. I was thinking about this when I was asked by Dr. Balaji from KSIT and KS group of institutions to be present here for about 15-20 minutes and speak something on innovation process. And I was getting the idea that I will talk about how does the innovation process take place in educational institutions, and how do we promote these, what I may call as the everyday promotion mindset, in educational institutions. This is one small part that I wanted to speak, and maybe I will speak for 5-10 minutes or 5-7 minutes also on how do we encourage creativity or innovation in organizations or in startups or in companies, or maybe we can contextualize to educational institutions also. Now, we use these two words, creativity and innovation, very synonymously in all our lives. We use these two words very synonymously, but I think if we have to define these two words, creativity and innovation, there is a slight difference between the two. Creativity is about producing new ideas or connecting known ideas and objects in new ways, and that will be creativity. Research activity in an institution very much goes towards this creativity angle, producing new ideas or connecting dots between which have not been connected earlier between different areas. And if I take innovation, innovation is the result of developing and implementing the ideas in ways that add value and affect the lives of people, Well, that is the difference, adding value and changing the lives of people, impacting the lives of people. That will the difference between uh, creativity and innovation. Many big people have given many thoughts on this creativity, innovation, and creative thinking. Maybe I'll just read one or two of these thoughts. One was by Albert Einstein. He told that the world we have created is a product of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking. And if we need to change something, we need to change our thinking first for creating something different. Walt Disney said that if you can dream it, you can do it. Pablo Picasso said that every act of creation is first an act of destruction. There are different ways in which this creativity is looked. And if I wanted to give a lecture on the different ways in which innovation or creativity happens in different organizations, there are quite a few points that we can talk about how the innovation happens in different institutions, but not at this time, not in this lecture. The world we have created this was the Albert Einstein's, and ideas are the currency of success. They separate you from your competition. I think we can go on listing these type of thoughts given by many big people, and we can see the importance of creativity and innovation from the old times onwards, But this has become more significant now in the present world because of the accelerating rate of changes in the technology, because of the digitalization of the economy, digitalization of the industry, we call it Industry 4.0, and everything having changed the characteristics. The characteristics have changed in everything that we do in our lives today. And therefore, the game of innovation has also changed. The game of innovation also has changed in its time frame, in its style of doing that change. Everything has changed in the present world. What is the present world that we talk about? Obviously, everybody knows about this, but I will just make one or two small points on this. And that is, it is a world of smart, interconnected technologies. Smart and interconnected technologies. And these technologies are transforming the complete value chain of how the products are made, how the solutions are designed, and these solutions are used, how the solutions are maintained. All these have changed. And the emphasis is now on faster, cheaper, and better. The other impact that we see of the modern world is the expectations of people have changed. The expectations of people have changed. And when we say the expectations have changed, it is mostly around immediacy, that is on the spot, immediate products, immediate changes, immediate requirements. In the spot of personalization, that is the change that has come. People want personalized products and consistency. I think that is the big change that we are seeing today. And the digital technology that we have today, what I call as the exponential technology that we have today, people are more connected, so there are more information exchanges. There are always on system, and they are driven by real-time access and to the availability of massive amount of information and intelligence at their command, which affects the products and activities of startups too. They have to be conscious of this. Now, on the angle of institutions, on the angle of institutions, if we have to talk about how do I try to meet these type of expectations in the education system, there can be a lot that can be talked about, and the changes that we need to do in the education system for I probably the word change is a wrong notion. I think we need to probably modify our education processes such that we can inculcate these type of characteristics in the students, and this inculcation of the characteristics either make them suitable for starting their own startups or make them suitable for joining these startups and the present industry 4.0. We need both types of people. Everybody will not become an entrepreneur. Everybody will not become an innovator. That is for sure. So I think we need to inculcate these process changes in the education system that will be required for cultivating this, what we may call as the way of everyday innovation mindset. Everyday innovation mindset. Now, if I call this everyday innovation mindset, what do we need in this mindset will be the question. And the need for the requirement that we have to have this. One is a higher learnability quotient. That is what we need. And this higher learnability quotient comes from the learning of the new skill sets of the world, the new toolkits of the world, and the changing toolkits of the world at a very fast pace, I think the earlier lifestyles of learning a toolkit or learning a skill set, hone it over the first years of its existence in the industry or in the professional field, with experience that you get by working on that skill sets, increase it by attending sub courses for increasing that skill set, and then based on the experience become a leader in that particular area and complete your life cycle of the working age. It was good enough. That was the cycle earlier. But the present day people, whether it is in the innovation companies or the new startups or the existing industry changing in the present stage, probably that will not work. Looks that the average change of profession that will be required maybe 6 to 9 times in a career. So the ability to be able to adapt and learn in this new world, the ability to learn new toolkits at a very fast pace, the ability to unlearn. I think this is something very different, very difficult. The ability to unlearn and readapt what we have known, the ability to keep pace with the rapidly evolving technologies and their impact on everything, and the ability to live with these new technologies and use these technologies for our use. That will be the skill set, or that will be characteristics that will be required of the particular students now. The other skill set that will be required for the students would be to be able to solve the unknown, to solve the new disruptive technologies or to create new disruptive technologies, to come up with new innovative ideas, and to create growth opportunities, disruption, and challenge the status quo of the world. Very easily said, but very difficult to implement in education systems to get these innovative mindsets. I think if we have to put this, one thing obviously I mentioned is the learnability quotient. And this learnability quotient increases with cognitive skills and with hard skills both. And we have to be careful about both these cognitive skills and hard skills in our educational curricula, educational system of converting this education to the use of and by this. Now, I talked about the exponential growth in technologies And this exponential growth of technologies is because of the Moore's law that we talk about, the Moore's law and the doubling of the capacity of the transistors on the chips every 18-20 months. And that gives us the doubling and the exponential growth of rate in technologies of sensing, in technologies of memory, in technologies of anything connected with these chipsets, connect the ability of computing at that faster pace, and the exponential rise of the communication systems that we have in the world. All these are giving us the exponential rate of change in the technology field. And the same exponential rate of change is evident in the social media, in the connectivity, in the globalization. Globalization, not in terms of the market sense of business globalization, but the people globalization, the connectivity globalization, and everything that we do in that particular thing, that also is increasing. And the exponential changes that are happening in the human systems, whether it is the environmental systems or whether it is the sea water systems or whether it is to do with the climate change, all these things are also exponentially changing. So any startup, any individual trying to become a startup or any individual joining the industry will have to be on the run at every time to be able to get to be able to use the characteristics that he or she must have got during the educational phase, which I just now said: adaptability to unlearn, adaptability to change, adaptability to be able to use the social media, the keeping up with this exponential rise of everything that is happening in the picture. We need we are at sort of tipping point of this exponential change. I think the impact of this exponential change is very critical to understand, very, very critical to understand by the young people and by everyone. I think we cannot even imagine the changes that come to us every 18-20 months, if it is the chessboard game and the story of the king and the rise, then we are at the 32 or 33 point of the chessboard. And if I move 33 to 34, I am doubling the 33 point into the 34 point, not the first point doubling to the second point. And the change that we see in this type of world will be so impactful and so big that imagination becomes difficult. Also, the shift that has happened in the learning systems is that the democratic characteristics of the students have changed. The democratic characteristics of the students, they are always on students. There are always digitally connected students. They virtually collaborate with anybody in the globalized world, and they have a shorter attention span. The learning track requirements have changed in the present world of the students. The continuous learning to adapt to the new business and social landscapes is what is the new era of the context of learning, as we call it as learning 4.0. The access to technology earlier was only when we needed the technology. The access to technology is now omnipresent. Whenever we get access to technology. It's omnipresent. And this makes, again, a big difference in the learning pattern. The organizational approach to this learning process changed in the educational institutions and in the companies also. The hiring by the companies like Google or Microsoft or big companies have changed from the need of trying to hire people on the basis of their technological characteristics or technological expertise, have changed to their requirement of what I need today and what is the skill sets that I need today. And then keep changing the number of people, the organizational characteristics have also changed. And this, what I call a just-in-time hiring, is pick and pace. Even in India, Tata Consultancy Services have tried to start this at this point of time. Then, and we retain people in companies, only such people who are able to change with the changing environments and not continue with the same skill sets. The life cycle of skills have changed, and therefore the educational 4.0 or the learning 4.0 has changed. And this life cycle of change gives a half-life of about 18 to 24 months to every student. And the half-life of 18 to 24 months to every student means a skill set change at a very fast pace. And we need what we call as multifaceted skill sets. Therefore, the learning institutions and the students who learn in this will need to go through in the future of this new world, the contextual learning. One is the contextual learning will become important. The style of learning has to become contextual, and the adaptation by teachers to be able to give this contextual learning will be important. The learning will be in an ecosystem which leads to a talent market space. And this will be in a sense that the skill sets that the student gets into the system of education of these 4 years of engineering or any other courses of the number of years that we have is changing the model of the marketplace. We'll also need in the future what we call as personalized and outcome-based education for the personalized system. A massive change in this by the MOOCs that came up a few years back, 10 years back or so, massive online education thing, by which we were able to provide education anytime, anywhere, and to anybody at any time they wanted, at any time they wanted. But the analysis of the results of these MOOCs and the courses given by these MOOCs and the data indicated that many people don't take the exams at the end of this MOOC program. It is hardly 5, 7, 8% of the students who do this. And therefore the evaluation methods and the outcome measurements is very difficult in these MOOCs courses. So we will need to now make a personalized and maybe hybrid system, and which is able to measure the outcome. And we'll also need continuous validation checkpoints and rethinking on the values of the degrees that we give to the students, the value of the degrees. And this would mean that the social and collaborative learning that happens today in terms of the social work, in terms of the other activities that happens in a social setting, will also need to be evaluated and be presented as a part of the skill set presentation to the industry, not just the technical or the knowledge skill sets that we give. We can talk about more changes in the engineering systems and things like that, but probably I will stop there on this particular point and just state that in an educational system today, what we have and the changes the education system is going through, the creation of students just in the form of what we may call as the leader students and the follower students that we create today. One, the creation of students in the sense of following the commands given by the leaders and doing the day-to-day activities in a very systematic and hard, intelligent, hard way, in a very in a way in which they polish the activity that is required as directed by the leader, is changing into a horizontal way of reading where everybody has to become intensive, everybody has to become intelligent at that particular place, and the communication systems to every worker gets changed. And this is the change of the new 4.0 environment in the systems. Now, you will also see that in the educational systems today, we have the provision of creating what we call the startups, the entrepreneurship culture, and also the provision of processes, systems, and uh, physical spaces which help in the creation of startups, I'm sure the expert today will talk much more on this, on the creation of the startups, the facilitations required in the educational institution, and the mindset required of the individual or group of individuals to start these startups and things like that. And I'm sure you will be listening more to it. So I will expand on this particular thing from the point of view of the student and the group of students starting the startup. But probably I will talk a little bit about the requirements of the educational sector or the educational entrepreneurs, the private entrepreneurs or the government entrepreneurs in the education field, to provide the right types of requirements meeting at the educational space for these startups, and which is also obvious, known. We talk about these innovation cells, we talk about the incubation centers, we talk about the mentorships requirements, we talk about the connectivity to be created, we talk about the platforms to be made available for these connectivities to mentors, to angel investors, and to the venture capitalists. We talk about the platforms to be provided for marketing activities. We talk about the platforms and spaces to be available for these young entrepreneurs to do their activities in a cost-effective way at this part of their career. We also talk about the creation of courses. We try to talk about the creation of skill set training programs for the students to learn the art and science of these startups in terms of trying to teach them about the commercial aspects, the managerial aspects, the technical aspects, and the marketing aspects of these things. And we provide them expertise in the educational system, We provide them atmosphere in the institutions, which tries to make them much more freer than what they are in the educational space. We try to provide them with seed money fundings in the systems to be able to hone at the early stage their ideas, and bring it to the prototype level. And then there are other means of funding for taking this from the TRL levels of 0, 1, 2 to TRL levels of 8, and then make this process or the product at the TRL 8, 9 level to become commercial products, and the success of the startup starts at that particular point. We try to provide them interconnectivity of different sets required, different sets of people required. And all these we do through many activities that we do at the institutional level, and many of these activities that get supported by different state government and central government schemes which come to us, the most latest being the Atal schemes for innovation help, and the existing schemes of the DST, DSIR for helping in these activities. The venture capitalism are the chain of funding required, starting from the seed funding to the level A, B, C, D funding at the levels of production and scaling up at the level of scaling up, and the different steps in between funding also are available through various channels in the space of this market of the startup and things like that. I'm sure you'll be able to get more information from the expert today who will talk about this. But I will just spend a few more minutes on what I wanted to say, that having started a startup, I just wanted to add one more word. I think we have now the possibilities of not just the students starting the startups, but we also have the possibility of the faculty entering into the entrepreneurship business. along with their teaching and other activities. It is not that I get off from there and do the activities. I think there are possibilities have opened up for becoming a faculty entrepreneur along with the teaching activity. And there are now possibilities opening of what we call as the spin-offs also, where the institution also uses its money to promote some of the technologies which may be useful for humanity in the future, or which may be useful for the technology world itself. And we create these spin-offs also. And that type of activities also have started in India by a few of the institutions. So these all possibilities and the different regulatory structures, different institutional regulatory structures that we need are a subject of great detail. The subjects of valuation of the technology, the subjects of conflicts of interest, the subject of academic conflicts, the subject of financial conflicts in institutions, the subject of the valuation of the companies, and everything are subjects each which require a lot of depth. And I'm sure in some way, the potential startup students and the potential faculty entrepreneurs will get the ropes of this in a very slow pace, the ropes of this in a slow pace. And some of them which pick it up fast and in the right way become successful entrepreneurs at the end. But whatever that we do, a startup, when it comes up, either faculty startup or a student startup, or there are some of the big companies which encourage internal startups in a way in which it is a little bit different than a startup of the different type, but they do encourage employees to be able to do their own new idea thinking and new idea, taking them up to a particular level, and at the end maybe they themselves will spin it off as a new company and things like that. But all in these ways, they need a system of promoting or encouraging these steps or these processes of creativity and innovation in their organization. Many organizations do it in many different ways, many different ways. But I don't think I will read out. I will probably talk about the 30 points that I noted down, in which these companies or these organizations or these startups need to encourage the people in their company or the systems in their company to be set up such that the innovation component or the creativity component is encouraged like it. But probably I will try to sum it up in three or four points. And that is, for all these companies, the first thing is, it is all about people. I think this is one thing which is very critical. It is all about people. And when I talk about people, I can talk about when I talk about people, I can talk about the diversified teams of people, the diversification of the people's capabilities. I can talk about the people from different disciplines coming together, with different background coming together. I can talk about the different culture of the people coming together. And I can talk about the environment for these people to be inclusive atmosphere, I think that is the one success mantra of a typical startup or a company, The thing would mean that these startups from the very beginning, probably I'll limit myself to startups, maybe big companies also they may apply, take punch the right tickets at the right time. They take the people on the bus at the right time of right skill set. I think this is very critical, very critical. It may be a marketing person, but at the right time to load him on the bus is very critical, The other thing is they get and give respect to everybody. This is again very important characteristic of an innovative and creativity culture. The system should not take over in startups. The system should be adaptable and flexible in the way that the system should be for these startups. The young people or the young startup people will always strive and should always strive to create a very respectable atmosphere in the companies where they start, valuing valuing the people, valuing the relationships, valuing the interconnectivity of people. The second point is, I think a startup has to always dream with its customers, Unless we do the dream with the customers that we are potentially trying to attack or potentially trying to attract towards our products, unless we dream along with their thought processes, the startups have lesser chances of success. And the third point is to create an open innovation culture in this system, This looks pretty tough, but the open innovation culture for the smart people and to build what they want to build in the way they want to build, Most of the times, our standardized thinking, our standardized thought processes in the mind constrain these, and that should be avoided in startups. Next
Sir,
point.
sorry to interrupt, sir. If you
I'll
can
just two
conclude
more
the other.
minutes.
Yes, sir. Fine. Thank you, sir.
Don't be afraid. That is another mantra that we should be having. Don't be afraid. And take the crisis that comes in this process of startups as an opportunity. And the last point I would say, and this is, have always fun. And make the system as funful as possible, as resourceful, as enjoyable as possible. I think there are some of the small mantras of a small startups that we can do, whether faculty, students, or these are applicable also to established companies, who want to change over to these new cultures, I would like to wish all young people who want to do startups and who want to do grow in this field of startups. I can tell you for sure that the opportunities even in our country are aplenty today. The mindset of people at the government level, at the institutional level, and at the societal level is they have just started to accept failures, not yet completely, I can understand, but they have started the realization of the failure being the first step towards success. And that is also very important in this age of this entrepreneurship. And we have a huge amount of funding available at different levels of funding to young entrepreneurs in this country. So wish the young entrepreneurs all the best in their endeavors that they will do in the future, and wish them all success. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your wonderful session, sir. And probably we'd like to host you again in some time, where we want a longer session to have personal interaction if possible, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, and I would like Soumya Madam from KSS School of Architecture to propose vote of thanks.
Hello, Soumya here. Good evening, audience. On behalf of KS School of Architecture, I would like to thank Professor Kincha sir for gracing us with his presence here on this platform. We hope to interact more with you in the future through IIC activities in KSCC. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to the audience. Thanks to the audience.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to call upon Professor Arti Meena, convener IIC, Cambridge Institute of Technology, to introduce today's speaker of the session, Kiran Betadapur sir, the crowd.
Shall I go ahead, sir?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Yeah. Very good evening, all. It's an immense pleasure to introduce Mr. Kiran Betadapur. Kiran Betadapur is a practicing advocate and patent attorney. He invests in early stages startup and is a qualified company secretary. He specializes in corporate matters, valuation, patent litigations, property rights, and international trade law. An industrial engineer by qualification, Mr. Kiran is an alumnus of IIT Kharagpur and IISc Bangalore. As an entrepreneur, he co-founded and bootstrapped many ventures. In his corporate career, Mr. Kiran headed operations for the Birlas based out of California and had served as the head of sales and marketing of banking, insurance and finance segment for HCL, Hewlett Packard in Mumbai. So Mr. Kiran usually enjoys teaching and delivers lectures regularly in schools and colleges. So he is equally earnest among legal activism and constitutional reforms. And a very important thing to say to all the participants here is his first book, Gita and the Art of Selling, was nominated for the Crossword Book of the Year award. I congratulate on this, sir, and I welcome you for this session, sir. Over to Murlidhar, sir, IAC President.
Kiran sir, it's over to you, sir. You can go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Professor Kincha, it's always a pleasure to listen to you, sir. I'm also an alumnus of IAC Bangalore, and I've always held you in very, very high esteem. I'll make use of a PowerPoint presentation, and I believe I have about 45 minutes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sure. My screen sharing is disabled.
I'll right now I'm doing it, sir. Sir, I have done it, sir. I made you co-host.
The topic that has been given to me is startup initiation, and also, various stages of startups. And also, I've been asked to speak about the legal and the ethical aspects of setting up a startup and coming up with a new idea and setting up a new venture around that idea. The best way of understanding a startup is to look at the way a startup, a typical startup, the life cycle of a typical startup. And the analogy to use is that of a hockey stick. The hockey stick obviously has a horizontal piece to it and a vertical piece. Now, even before the horizontal piece, there are these dots that I have on the screen, which is basically the tinkering stage in a startup's lifespan. What goes on in the tinkering phase? There is somebody out there, maybe in college or maybe in institute, a lab, a company, wherever, who has an idea, who has a certain understanding of the marketplace and the needs that exist in the marketplace. And he or she believes that this particular idea would be a sure shot success in the market. And the person examines the idea, develops the idea. He's obviously on to other things. He's busy with his own work, earning a livelihood. And, over his weekends, he starts working on the idea. Now, in the second stage, which is the blade here, the horizontal blade, that's the blade with which you hit the ball or the puck if it is ice hockey. That is when the idea gathers momentum. It becomes a little more concrete and a little more mature. The person who has conceived the idea commits himself or herself to the idea, gives a name to it, sets up the business, goes through the process of setting up the business, incorporating the business maybe, and goes about putting in place the core team. Absolutely vital. In a nutshell, whenever you have an idea and you want to set up startup and then have a core team in place, one recommendation that I would give is look for team members, the core team members who would complement your skills. Ideally, have somebody, if somebody is a product design expert, have him on board. If somebody is a marketing expert, understands sales and marketing, have him on board. That is the way you look for complementing expertise and skill sets to form your core team. Now, during the blade years, obviously the revenue is flat. You're still developing the idea. Maybe you have a proof of concept in place. Maybe a prototype has been developed. You're obviously looking for market acceptance. You're not sure if you were to take the product or the idea to the market, whether the market would embrace it, would welcome the product or the idea. So in a way, the blade years are a make or break kind of a phase in the life cycle of a startup. Now, 95% of the startups fail during this time. Those that cross this phase successfully are in that upswing. You know, their prospects, future prospects are on the uptick. So they have a revenue model and a business model that is well defined. They start generating revenues, which means there are paying customers. Now they also start, because there are paying customers and the revenue is going up year on year or quarter on quarter, they begin to hire employees. And they end up with a definitive marketing plan to execute the idea that they have and to penetrate the market, saturate the market much better. Cash flows, you're always tight on cash. You know, there is money in the bank, even if you've been funded by a venture capitalist. But then your growth is on the upswing. So making sure that your cash inflows and cash outflows are all well balanced and you have it all planned out is always a challenge. Many times during this growth inflection phase, that is the third stage, you may have to pivot. What does pivoting mean? You started off with a core idea. You played around with the idea. You took the idea to the market. Now, market always gives a feedback. If the market, your customers are excited about it, the idea, the product that you have, or information, news about your product will spread like wildfire. Otherwise, the market will be very lukewarm, the response of the market, in which case you may want to go back to the drawing board, modify the idea, modify, improve, or enhance your product and relaunch it, or sometimes even change your business model itself. And that's the pivoting that goes on in a typical startup's life cycle. Finally, you know, once the startup has become successful, you see surging growth. And in this surging growth phase, there is rapid increase in revenues, rapid increase in customer acquisition. And once you start acquiring customers, new customers, retaining them also becomes a challenge. And then all the business challenges creep into the picture. The long term, the biggest challenge for any startup is that of survival. The startup has to survive. So if you look at all these phases, the starting point is always the idea. So the core idea, the stronger the core idea, the better the chances of startup success. Now, how do you figure out what a core idea is? If you want to become an entrepreneur in your life, how do you, and we've started off by saying that the core idea is vital. How do you identify the right core idea? There are 4 ways of looking at any core innovative idea. Does the idea create something? Which means, does it create a product that satisfies a need? Does it create a functionality, a feature in an existing product that customers would like to have? That's one question that you would ask yourself. The second question is, does my idea eliminate something? Which means it can eliminate wastage, it may eliminate some pain that exists, a problem that exists in the market. So that's the second question that you would ask. There are also ideas that could increase something, increase performance, increase productivity, increase speed, things of that sort. And on the flip side of increase, there could also be ideas that reduce something. Reducing could be reducing energy loss, reducing wastage, reducing time wastage. There are so many of these things that the idea could accomplish. The best way of looking at an idea in terms of a template or a boilerplate is to look at the value proposition. The idea, if in the previous slide, I had those 4 questions. If the answer to any one of those questions is yes, then you look at this template. And the way to figure out whether your idea has a distinct value proposition is to ask yourself, does the idea feel somebody or the user feel better, cleaner, good, relaxed, safe, etc.?
Sir, slides are not moving, sir. Sorry to interrupt.
Slides are not moving? Oh, okay.
No, sir.
Okay. I think if I put it on slideshow mode, it doesn't show up.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter. So I'll just quickly go through the slides only because to give context to the current slide. This was the first slide that I started off with. Then I moved on to this slide. Right now, I'm on this slide, the value proposition slide. So does it help the user save time, money, space? That's the other part of the the template here, the boilerplate that you would use, the filter that you would use to make sure that the idea that you've identified has a distinct value proposition. Value proposition is what you would take to the marketplace. Work efficiently, reduce work with higher ease of doing work, speed, productivity, similarly making something cheaper, mobile, rugged. This is all about the product. All these constitute a value proposition. Generally, whatever idea you have and whatever product or service that you want to take to the market may also incorporate multiple of these value propositions. That is vital to remember. And the more value propositions that are there, the better the chances of success in the marketplace. The starting point clearly is a definitive value proposition. But Professor Kincha mentioned earlier that the value proposition, having started with a definitive value proposition, you need to make sure that the value proposition is compelling. It compels a user who is in that sweet spot, who is the target audience, the user or the customer who is the target audience, finds the value proposition compelling. But even better is a value proposition that is disruptive. That is what Professor Kincha mentioned during the course of his talk. Finally, the ideas or the products that are reshaping an existing market, that change an existing market dramatically, that is what you would want to aim for. Markets or startups that end up reshaping markets are what venture capitalists would love to go after. Regardless, even disruptive, compelling value propositions also get funded. And how do you go about selecting the idea? Clearly, it's a cyclical problem. You come up with the idea, you assess, you implement the idea in terms of a proof of concept or a prototype, see how it works, get customer feedback, refine the idea. So very straightforward. It's a cycle kind of a thing. There is another way in which you could look at a startup that is set up. Again, it is the same hockey curve, put in a little differently, if you see. And this is what I alluded to earlier, referred to earlier. Most startups fail before it goes on to the upswing. The vertical part of the stick starts. And that's the valley of death. 95% of startups fail in that space. And you will see here, it starts with idea. The way I look at that curve, there are 4 inflection points, 4 key stages that every entrepreneur needs to remember. And once you are focused on those 4 key points, inflection points, and you make sure that whatever you're working on, the startup that you've come out with has focused on those 4 inflection points, you're doing okay. The first one is the tech risk. That's the earliest stage. That's at the ideation stage. And what is the technology risk? You have to create value. If there is no value in the idea, the market is going to shun the product. And if you are a startup that has technology, a technology-driven startup, make sure you think in terms of intellectual property protection, be it branding, be it trademarks, be it copyright, and most importantly, be it patents. The second stage, which is a stage at which the technology is all taken care of, the product is ready, the product has been taken to the market, which means the product has had customer, you've gotten it validated by a customer. That's the stage when the market risk kicks in. The product is ready, it is validated, but will the market accept it? And that at that go-to market stage, the most important drivers of success are how well is the product designed. The better the product is designed, the more appealing it is to the customers, the more likely they are going to buy the product. The business model, how sound is your business model? And then the point at which you decide, I'm ready to enter the market, the go-to market strategy as it is called. So the tech risk is the first inflection point. Market risk is the second inflection point. Once the market has accepted the product and your revenue-wise, you're on the upswing, profit obviously becomes the next risk inflection point. That is where the effectiveness of your market communication, how do you take your value proposition? How do you communicate to the market about your product? How do you reach? How do you penetrate the market? How do you saturate the market? These are all challenges that are driven by sales, marketing, advertising, sales promotion, publicity, etc. So the better these activities are, market communication, advertising strategies, sales and marketing strategies, the more likely you're going to become profitable. Finally, the challenge is for businesses. It's obviously of growth. Market is accepted, you become profitable. How do you sustain it? How do you keep growing your business year after year, quarter after quarter, etc., and then eventually survive? That's the final challenge for every startup. The key to this growth risk phase, dealing with the growth risk phase, is to think of cash flows and goodwill and to manage both as well as possible. The better your cash flow management and goodwill management, the more successful you're likely to be. Again, this is a different way in which I put the risks, tech risks, market risks, same thing. At the tech risk stage, you're thinking about value. At the launch product stage, the market risk stage, you've launched the product and it is all about how well you've launched it. Delivering the value that you've thought, that's at the growth risk phase. And finally, survival risk. You're doing business, you've got to make sure that the business survives. And from an investing standpoint, at the technology risk stage, you're in the seed capital stage. You're looking for friends, family, raising capital, raising the paid up capital for your company, the initial bootstrapping, the money that you need to bootstrap the venture. Everybody is on sweat equity, nobody is earning any salary. So that's the seed capital stage. And then you move on to the angel capital. So once the technology risk has been crossed, which means either you have a prototype or you have a proof of concept, and that proof of concept establishes the fact that it is a product that works. At the market risk stage, initially, you're looking for angel investment, venture capital and public capital markets is at the growth risk stage. And sometimes there are enterprises that have challenges surviving in business. At that stage, generally private equity comes into play. So from an investment standpoint, it is also important to look at yourself as a startup vis-a-vis the funding, the investor market, and see what stage you're in. Now, in terms of selecting the opportunity, I talked about how to go about choosing your idea. Now, besides choosing the idea, you've got to always make sure, generally an idea is about, the important thing that you must remember is there are many ideas, but all ideas are not innovative. All innovations, though, they have an idea at the center. So how do you figure out the right opportunity, the right idea, the right innovative idea to take to market and build a startup around? The way to look at it is, the choice is product. At the product and technology risk, you ask yourself the question, is the product desirable? I have a value proposition, and if I take it to the market, take it to a user who presumably has a need for that idea, will he want to buy it? If the answer is yes, you ask yourself, with technology that is available, manufacturing technology, etc., can I manufacture this product? So that's at the product and technology risk stage. At the market risk stage, you look at the competitive landscape. Will people pay for my product? Who else is there? Does somebody else have a similar product? Those are the questions that you ask. And those questions are all related to the market risk stage. Financial risk is about profitability of the venture. That is where you ask yourself, is the business likely to be viable? Is the innovative product that I have, is it viable in the marketplace? These three questions, if the answer for all these three questions are yes, then the product per se is innovative. So, idea is the starting point. For the idea to be innovative, the answers to these three questions has to be yes. The fourth question is about operations risk, which is, can I take this idea and grow it year on year and keep increasing revenues, generating profits, coming out with new products in this space? And that operations risks stage. The question is it sustainable, the idea that I have? If the answer for all the four bubbles, all the four questions is yes, then that is a fantastic opportunity that you have, and you shouldn't be missing out on that opportunity. Many times at the beginning, there is no way anybody can be a Nostradamus and look into the future and figure out and answer all these questions. But these are all judgment calls. Right at the beginning, you will think about the product and make sure that you're convinced that the product or the idea represents a good, effective opportunity. And once you've done that, you've got to decide the business structure. There are generally two main streams of business structure depending on the liability that the founder has. In case of either it is unlimited liability, which means if the business were to fail and the business were to become loss-making, who will pay for those losses? Now, in case of unlimited liability, the founders would be responsible for the unlimited liability. They have unlimited liability if there is some loans that they have taken and the business becomes bankrupt and they have to repay those loans. Then the owners become liable personally. So sole proprietorship, again, it has unlimited liability. A partnership firm, again, has unlimited liability. Limited liability are the limited liability partnerships, one-person company, private limited company. That is where you go into the corporate part of business structure. There are hybrid business structures. I'll not dwell too much on it. Producer companies, which is typically meant for the agricultural class in India. Nevertheless, the way to, as a thumb rule, if I were to tell you what business structure to adopt for your idea, for your startup, I'll say unless and until you are on to phase 2 of the business cycle, which is here in the hockey stick curve, you've crossed the tinkering stage, you've gone on to the blade ear stage, which means the idea itself is mature, you've thought through the idea and you feel idea mein dum hai, once you are convinced that the idea has potential, that is when you think in terms of business structure. And the business structure, if it is services, generally I would recommend to begin with pure professional services. If it is professional services oriented, a limited liability partnership. If it is trading, pure trade, or you just buy from somebody, stock it somewhere, retail, I would always recommend either a sole proprietorship or a partnership firm. The company structure kicks into play when there is risk, greater risk. The more the risk, the more you need to have liability limited. That is when you need to think in terms of one-person companies, start with a private limited company, because the corporate entity, the corporate business structure has disadvantages also. One of the biggest disadvantages is there are a lot of compliance related activity that you would get driven into, which means you will have to do periodic filings on the registrar of companies database. You have to get your books audited. All that is becomes a distraction for a early stage startup. Always keep that in mind. Don't jump, default. Everybody will talk to a chartered accountant and say, let's start a company. The moment you started a company, you got to pay the company secretary, you got to pay the chartered accountant for auditing your books. All of that costs money. And then you've set up with a seed capital, initial paid up capital of 1 lakh for the company. And within no time, the 1 lakh is gone. And then you're looking for money. So your entire strategy, the business structure strategy to begin with, has to necessarily be driven by survival instinct. And for surviving in business, you need to conserve cash. So once the business structure is taken care of, how do I figure out what are the secret sauces for success in business? This is where the legal and the ethical angles come in, besides 2 other aspects, which I've highlighted here. Legal is about compliance. Anytime you're in business, make sure you are compliant. Because if there is, let's say, an income tax raid, the next 6 months to 1 year, you're handling the raid-related matters, your books have been taken away, even survival of your business becomes a challenge. If you're a startup, a tech or idea-driven startup, an IPR-driven, intellectual property rights-driven startup, make sure you protect it well, which means you file patent applications, things of that sort. Never miss out on statutory approvals. There could be permits, there could be licenses, there could be approvals needed. There are so many of these statutory. Law wants you to do these things before you get into some businesses. There are businesses where if, let's say, your output is a hazardous waste, you got to take environmental clearances. Never ever cut the corners on this, because in the long run, if you want to build a successful enterprise, these things will come in and they will become major stumbling blocks. Contracts, make sure from a legal standpoint, you take good care of your contracts. Don't worry about contracts from a lawyer's perspective. Review contracts from a businessman's perspective. And what is the businessman's perspective? I'm delivering some value, some product, whatever I've told my customer that I will deliver. Can I really deliver those specs that are there, the customer needs that are there, what is defined in the order? Am I ready to deliver it? Will the customer, if he were to check the product that I deliver, will the product conform with those specs? That's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is, once I deliver my product, will I get my money without any problems? A very, very high percentage of small companies, SMEs, MSMEs, actually, I should be saying micro, small and medium enterprises, their biggest nightmare is money recovery. They do business. Invariably, the last 10%, the 20% does not come. The customer cuts the payment saying, oh, you've not done this, you've not done that, you didn't supply the product on time. the product you supplied doesn't work. And finally, if you are small and you end up in a court of law, again, it is an expensive process. If you don't, you've lost money, and that reflects in your profit margin and your profitability. And finally, legal internal policies, absolutely vital. Make sure whatever policies you have, they're well-defined, internal policies. There are certain policies which law itself defines, like sexual harassment policies against, what should be the policy that you should have to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace. All those things, make sure that you have taken good care of these aspects from the legal standpoint. Ethical standpoint, in business, finally, people buy from people they like, they respect, and they trust. Like, respect, trust. When you are looking for relationships with customers, relationships with suppliers, honesty, integrity, whatever promises you've made, the trust element. And how do you figure out, how do you make sure that there is trust? Never promise something that you cannot deliver. And always make sure that you deliver whatever you've promised. Simple things like that, simple mantras like this should be guiding your entire process. Then trustworthiness, credibility. The more trusting you are, the more you make sure that you don't commit to something that you cannot honor later on, the more your credibility, which means the better you will be able to retain your customers. And then through word of mouth, others are going to get to know about you, and your business is going to grow organically. Care and concern right across the board, care for your employees, concern for your employees. All these things are ethical aspects to your business. You take good care of it. It will reflect in employee retention, repeat customers, customer loyalty, less attrition, etc., etc. So, and it will invariably reflect in terms of your productivity. Businesses has to be productive and profitable. And the two other things that I added, make sure the business is responsible. Everybody in the business, once you set it up, as it grows, especially financial responsibility. Make sure if you're an early stage startup, everybody make sure that they keep track of costs that are there. Once you get funded, make sure. Very often you see a company gets funded, a venture capitalist puts money in, and the next thing they know, they are having a board meeting in Singapore. Now, why do you need to have a board meeting in Singapore? You've raised capital, no doubt, but that doesn't entitle you to holding a board meeting in Goa or board meeting in Singapore. Make sure you conserve capital. Community and the society, responsibility, being responsible to the society around you, to the community around you, that's absolutely vital. And environmental factors, workforce, responsible. My employees are my real strength. Make sure as a company, as an entity, the management should feel, the leadership in the company should make sure that they look at it as a responsibility that they have towards the workforce. Similarly, the investors that are there, all stakeholders, make sure your entity is a responsible, you build a responsible entity that looks at duties that they have towards all these stakeholders. The government is also a stakeholder. Your filings, make sure you're compliant, corporate compliance, legal compliance, and also your partners. Partners could be your channel partners, your distributors, your retailers, they could be your suppliers. Make sure that you look at them, you build. The key idea point that I'm trying to make here is build strong relationships. Businesses become successful when they are built on strong relationships. And finally, make sure that you are responsive. Speed is of essence, agility is of essence, proactiveness towards employee welfare, client needs, technological trends, being innovative. Look at innovation as a process, not as just one point. You don't come out with an innovative product once. and then expect that product to sell for the next 100 years. You've got to look at innovation as a continuing process. The most successful enterprises that are considered to be innovative businesses always look at innovation as a continuing process. And finally, the key, never forget the business fundamentals. What are the business fundamentals? The 3P, 3S, 3D. Productivity, profitability, predictability of your business. How, if I come out with a forecast for next quarter, how predictable, how accurate will that forecast be? 3S, scalability of your business, sustainability over the long term, and finally survival, because all businesses have to survive. And the key thing for ensuring the 3P and the 3S, you take good care of it, is to de-risk your business. De-risking, always, everybody looks at businesses from the profitability standpoint, profit standpoint. But in the long run, it is about de-risking yourself. So whatever decisions you take, decision making, make sure you have risk in mind, and given that risk constraint, you take your decisions. And in the digital world that we are in, digitalization of your business, of your product, of your idea, gear yourself up for a digital world. That's the key to it. And to sum it all, manage cash flows, manage goodwill, mitigate risk, and you will have a successful business. Any questions?
Sir, I think there are two questions to take on.
Okay.
One, what is the one most critical thing required to start a startup? Is one question now an audience has asked.
Excellent question. If you ask me, inspiration is the most important, the first thing that you need. You need to be inspired. Conviction. You need to be convinced about the idea that you have. That inspiration, look for that inspiration, and everything else will fall in place. Unless and until you are convinced, you have that conviction, and you take that leap of faith, you take that plunge, not knowing how deep the water is, right? And how likely you are to be successful. Unless and until you're supremely, and the key to be inspired is to first and foremost start with self-confidence. Self-belief is what drives it. So if you have self-belief, you will look for ideas, you will look for innovation, you will look for startups and become an entrepreneur. What is the other question? Cooperative. I see the other question. Cooperative. See, cooperative society is generally a not-for-profit entity. The reason why you're in business, of course, if you're a social entrepreneur, a society, a trust, these things, or a Section 8 company, they would work. But here we are talking about entrepreneurship from a for-profit perspective. So a cooperative society, yes. I mean, if you're looking at milk federations and producer, in fact, you will remember the hybrid model that I showed in that one slide that I shared. That hybrid of producer company is the company, corporate structure of a company, and the structure of a cooperative society, the two being merged together, and that's a producer company. So it takes the advantages of a cooperative society and the advantages of a company, and it merges the two, it integrates the two, and that's a producer company. Joint venture is something that you're looking for. There are so many of these things, but they are all hybrids. When you are looking at a startup, you will never look, especially an innovative startup, you will not look for a joint venture. A joint venture, why would an international partner team up with you and set up a joint venture with you? You are a nobody without a track record of doing business. Generally, joint ventures are formed between successful entities in different markets, different geographies, etc. So I hope I've answered that question right, or if there is a follow-up question, please let me know.
There's one more question he has there. Of course, you're pinging me in WhatsApp. So there is a technology which he's looking at developing. He's from a place called as Kolar, where there are a lot of tomatoes which are being wasted when the season is not right for the farmers. And he has some idea to convert that into some farm, and that farm is patented. That's what he says. Can he
Yeah.
commercialize that?
See, I
Yes.
don't know what his idea is, but
Hmm.
something of this kind lends itself to
Right.
a producer company. All that is needed for a producer company is 10 farmers
Hmm.
who put in money. I'm taking the example of farmers. It can be others too in the agricultural, fisheries, that space, or in the milk federation space. They set up a company and put in and it's like a cooperative society.
Okay, sir.
The only thing with the cooperative society is not for profit.
Hmm.
But then if you're planning to go all over India, go global with that concept, with that idea, you would necessarily want it to be for profit, or even talk to external investors to invest in the entity, because the producer company or a cooperative society is generally self-funded, and generally it grows organically, which means you bring in more members, and then you have elections, and you have multiple cans, and you know how the cooperative society or the society, general society works. But in a company, in a corporate structure, the key differentiator is there is a difference, this separation of investors from the managers of the entity, managers of the board of directors, the chief executive, etc. Investors are the shareholders, the investors, the investing community. They can be general investors, large investors. It could be institutional investors. It could be small investors if it is a publicly held company, etc. So, and generally the corporate structure is ideal for a profit-making entity if your objective is to make profits. But a cooperative society is not so. So if that is the case, then ideally you would want to look at a producer company, because the Cooperative Societies Act is state specific, whereas the Companies Act is applicable for the entire country. So if you have a great idea, I'm sure tomatoes, I'm sure maybe there are farmers in Maharashtra who are growing tomatoes, maybe in Madhya Pradesh. So a cooperative society that you set up in Kolar cannot make a farmer in Maharashtra a member. So
Right.
there are those challenges when you look at cooperative society. So I would advise you to look at producer company. And then once you've set it up, maybe the idea could be about coming up with cold storage units, that will take excess tomato produce, or when there is excess, look at making tomato juice out of it or ketchup out of it. And then you set up these factories, small scale factories. I don't know what the idea is all about, and how well you've protected the intellectual property for the idea. But these are the things that you may want to consider. And then think in terms of replicating the model. Whatever idea I have, can I have similar units in Raichur, in Belgaum, maybe in Sangli, Nagpur, and then across the board? Can I solve this problem of tomatoes, also use it for solving similar problems that exist for mangoes in Maharashtra, oranges in Nagpur? So so long as you think along these lines, cooperative society, you will realize, is not the approach, the business structure to adopt. Have I answered the question well, or
yes, sir. I think it's very clear. Anyhow, sir, if at all he has further queries, I will try to share your mail ID, sir. He can just mail you, and he can get connected to his there.
Sure. Any other questions?
Hopefully, no, sir. We have not got any other
Sure.
questions. So thank you so much for being here and giving the overview of what is all about legal and ethical ways of startups. You started with the value proposition, went on to talk about a lot of inflection points, which was an eye opener actually. Then you talk about the risks and opportunity choices that people should take. And you also talked about what are the structures of different organizations that you can choose when you want to do a startup. And of course, the most important thing which I liked personally was the secret sauce. So that's where all the components of startup come into picture, and that's why you have to protect your skin very tight. Whether poachers will be always there, and you have to protect yourself from this putting a sauce on that this thing. And thank you very much for being here and spending time with our people, sir. And it was a pleasure to host you. And we'll be seeing. We want to see you in the campus of sometime when you come here, sir.
Sure.
Thank
Thank you so much.
And we have 5 different college people here. One is KLE College in Belgaum attending the meeting. Then we have people from BVVS Polytechnic in Bagalkot attending the program. One ATME College in Mysore attending the program, and ISBR Business School in Bangalore and KSS School of Architecture, Bangalore, sir.
Wonderful.
On everybody's behalf, I thank you so much for being here and addressing us, sir.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having me address the audience.
Thank you all for participating, and thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend ahead.
Thank you.